Good afternoon. We would like to welcome you to our Work speaker series. Oops. Hang on just a minute. Here I'll get in presentation mode. Welcome to our Work NC Virtual NC Career Connection speaker series. And today we're so happy to have with us Miss Alex Lowrie to our October 14th, 2020 session, and we're celebrating Manufacturing Month. And she's here from Little Diversified Architectural, and she's at the Center for Building Performance. So thank you, Miss Lowrie, for being with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Great. Do you want to share a little bit about your job title, and then we'll get started with our interview questions?
Sure. A little bit of background about me. I have a degree in mechanical engineering and a master's in renewable energy engineering. Right now, I work at Little Architectural Consulting in our Center for Building Performance. So I do a lot of the energy efficiency calculations and simulations for LEED and net zero energy buildings, as well as net zero carbon buildings and code compliance. We make sure that the buildings are both cost effective and comfortable for the occupants. And I also previously have experience in manufacturing car parts and agricultural products.
Awesome. It's so good to have you. And we know Little has many jobs that they have within your company. So we're so proud that you are willing to come and speak to our students, because you just shared you've really not been out of school that long. So you can really share with them some of the things that helped you as you chose a career, and some things that you also found that might not be quite as appealing about the careers as you went along. So starting with our first questions, can you share a little bit about your personal interests that led you to choose your career in engineering?
Sure. I really enjoyed math and science. I thought it was very interesting to be able to look at a set of numbers or characteristics about something and know what would happen next in a chain of events based on information you have. It was cool, sort of like being able to predict the future. Also, I was pretty good with numbers, so it makes sense to go into math and sciences because that was something that was easy for me. So that sort of steered me towards the engineering world, and my mother actually is an engineer as well. The engineering bug from an early age.
That's wonderful to hear that you had this experience with your mother being an engineer. So you got a practical application of what the job was about. What would you recommend to young ladies that want to go into some of these STEM fields, especially engineering? Could you give them some tips or things they might do to help them see if that's an interest they have?
Yeah, yeah. I would say the best thing is to just go and try it, find out if it's something you enjoy. Um, Normally, people aren't very, I don't know, people aren't really all that sexist, but you will find that women tend to think of engineering less as an option, so there will be fewer of you there simply because fewer of your female peers have thought of doing it. Um, but if it's something you love, go for it. There's no reason not to. I think everybody I've met has been really great. And occasionally I am the only woman in the room, but that's okay. Everybody treats me like a fellow engineer.
That's great to hear, Miss Lowry. And what would you suggest that they think about, like, are there some particular clubs that you may have joined or some particular classes that help steer you in this current position that you're doing?
Well, I ended up being interested in building performance and energy efficiency from pretty early on, so I was always taking classes that aligned with what I wanted to do. My electives were studying solar panels, studying the energy implications of mass transportation, things like that. So I would say the best thing to do is be where you want to be. Join the clubs that you find interesting. Um, take the electives that you think might lead to you being able to get a job in something you want to do.
I love that you bring up the topic of solar panels and the energy and efficiency, because I've been looking at a hybrid car, and I live in a very rural area, so it's not like when you live around Raleigh where you can go plug your little car in. You know, you have very few stations, and like for me, just to go to town, it's a 30-minute drive. So, what would you recommend if we're looking for some of those energy efficiency things, even in not just buildings, but in our personal lives?
Well, if you are looking for reliability, reliability is a lot connected to availability. And before trying to get in deep and do new things, you've got to work on what you have, you know. If you have a house, you know, you can just start putting in LED light bulbs, you know. I'll do everything one step at a time. Um, that's how all humans work. You can only do one thing at a time. And it can be a slow process, and sometimes it's more about perseverance than anything.
I know we had a session with Becky Rettenwald through the governor's office, and she works in public policy, and she had some interest, I know, that directed her even to work in these fields. So it's good to see that these types of interests not only lead to something in engineering and those areas, but you could also do some public policy work. Do you encounter anyone in those fields as you go through what you have to do there at Little when you're looking at building performance and zoning laws? And could you touch a little bit on that? What skill sets would help students if they're interested in these type of careers?
Sure. I actually do run into public policy people a lot. I run into government officials in the local and state governments, as well as building performance advocates who are in charge of nonprofits that help North Carolina assess what updates they need to make to their building codes that would be effective for our area. And you need to be good at communicating. You need to be able to clearly express an idea. And a lot of people are like, oh no, that's a lot of English classes, that's a lot of writing classes. Um, but really, that's about just practicing expressing yourself. So that's a very important skill. And also, definitely pursue what you're interested in. If you're not willing to read through a lot of code, don't become a code official. If you really want to know more about how you can help people out in your community and what the aggregate impact of a policy is, you know, maybe being a government worker is great because, you know, you already want to go out and talk to these people. Um, if you don't like people, maybe you'd prefer to, you know, do simulations or something else.
Wow, those are some great suggestions, because I do careers with my students, and we talk about interests just like you've shared. We talk about personality traits, what makes a good career for various personality traits. So thank you for highlighting some of those things that would be for introverts and extroverts, because that's a very important consideration when you're looking at a job. So, what do you enjoy most about the current job that you have?
I love that it's a challenge every day. There's always something new to work on. There's always a new facet that comes up. We're adding this feature to the building. Now we need to make sure that, this part of it complies with code, but also so it's angled right so you get good light and everything is so interactive and synergistic with all the other parts. So it's really exciting to collaborate with a lot of disciplines. And to hone in on something that is going to have multiple different kinds of benefits. It will make people more comfortable, it'll make the building more cost effective to run, but it will also make the building look nice too. So it's fun to work with all of those factors.
Yes, and you bring into play about teamwork, collaborations. What attributes do you feel is very important for you to be successful in a workplace environment?
um, well, being able to clearly express yourself is one thing, but also understanding that there is a level of communication that you need to rise to make sure that everybody in your project and on your team is in the loop. Um, Making sure that everybody knows what's going on is very important. And then there's also the soft skills on just getting along with people. And I know a lot of you are thinking, oh no, gosh, do I have to be a people person to be an engineer or to work in an office? No, you don't have to be a people person. If you're not a people person, just be nice to everyone. And that always works. Don't be mean to people just because you can. It's not nice. And, I think that probably younger people understand better than older people. It's something that, if you don't practice, you get out of, you lose familiarity. So just always be nice to people and include them. If they're on the project, they need to know what's going on.
Wow, that's great advice, especially in the times that we're living, because being able to work with others is such an important skill. And that's one of the things that I hear over and over in these series is that working with others, like you say, including people in and making sure that you're doing your part. So those are definitely some wonderful gems that you're sharing with us as a practical job workplace situation. Thinking about your job and what you do there at Little, have you had any surprises that you did not think that would come about in your formal education versus your real world application of those skills?
I certainly did. You'll find that engineering is a very, very broad field and that there are many, many different kinds of jobs for every discipline in engineering. So in college, you learn a lot of the theory. You learn heat transfer, fluid dynamics, the things that help you have a good foundation for working in your field. That doesn't necessarily mean that you learn how to use the software that your future company will use. It doesn't necessarily mean that you will immediately know how to design a duct system or how to do piping for the plumbing in a building. There's a lot of very thick things that you will learn for your job once you have it that will not be covered in school. Um, and you do get surprises. You get surprises in life. Sometimes at work you're asked to do things that you weren't hired for, but it needs to be done by someone, and you're it. Um, Other times there will be surprises in your job. If you get left out of the loop, if you go on vacation for a week, sometimes you get back and they've added a full commercial kitchen to your building, and you're like, that's great. It entirely changes all of the calculations that I just did.
So it sounds like flexibility would be a great attribute to also add to your job arsenal to help you survive in the work world.
Oh, absolutely.
So, could you touch a little bit? I'm familiar with some of the things that you mentioned about like heat transfer controls because my son did mechatronics. But could you tell a little bit more about your educational endeavors? I know you shared that you did your undergrad at NC State and your master's at App State. So, could you share a little bit about those?
Yeah, so I got an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering from NC State, right in Raleigh. It was a great experience. I had my prerequisites didn't quite line up right, so it took me 7 semesters to graduate, so 3.5 years. So I took advantage of that by doing summer internships, and also I got a minor in economics. And after that, and after my first few internships, I realized that maybe being a regular mechanical engineer wasn't quite what I wanted to be doing. So I went to grad school for renewable energy engineering, and I ended up taking a concentration in energy modeling. And that's how I ended up working with Little.
Wow, it's great to see that you meshed those two degrees into this wonderful job that you're doing because I know your engineering background has to be a huge plus in what you're doing in renewable energy sources. Is there something in particular that you are targeting in your buildings now that maybe you didn't do a few years ago?
I think the industry as a whole has always been aspiring to, build well, build to last, build efficient. But recently, there's this big trend to build buildings that are healthy for the occupants. And I really love that because, if your building is uncomfortable and you don't like being in it, it doesn't matter how theoretically excellent it is if it can't perform. Um, and, it's not only having clean air to breathe and having clean water to drink. It's being close enough to a water fountain to be able to fill up your water bottle throughout the day. It's about being able to take the stairs instead of the elevator, having the stairs conveniently placed, having them wide enough so that you can walk with other people up them. um, all kinds of things about health and wellness, which is a really great thing. This helps every single person who's in the building. So that's been really exciting for me.
Those are great examples, and I know accessibility for disabilities is another thing that's also considered. And we know that in our COVID-19 world, it's very different. Are there any things that have changed in your design process because of COVID-19? Because I know there was concerns about even air duct systems and it carrying the air. Is there different filtrations that you're having to think about because of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So normally we do a two-part filtration system, once at the air inlet just to make sure that you're not getting the HVAC equipment dirty. But then usually it's filtered a second time in the building. Um, to make it, not smell weird and, just to make sure it's extra clean once it's getting to the people. And we've bumped those filters to be a little smaller, have smaller openings so they catch more dirt, more bacteria, more whatever is floating around in the air. We're also, based on applications, increasing the amount of fresh air that comes into the building, making sure we're not cycling the air around and around too much so that we're not spreading everyone's breath onto each other over and over. And we're using air scrubbers, like UV within the ductwork to make sure that we're killing anything that is going through the ducts. Um, and that is something that's really great because you don't have to spend all that much more energy on it. You don't have to spend all that much more money on it, and it will help you be healthy during the pandemic and also on afterwards.
That's great information because we know that it's very important for us to have these safety measures because we know that it's a person-to-person spread, and to hear these great things, because that was going to be one of my next questions, is there a great cost to it? But to hear that it's not is a really good thing. So that would be a good thing from COVID, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and we've done so many studies within the building science industry of the really great effects of breathing in cleaner air. There was a great study done out in California and LA. They doubled up on their air filtration, and the students' test scores improved um, almost the same way they would have improved if they reduced the number of students per teacher in the classroom. It was very dramatic. And it's important not only that we step this up just because of the pandemic, but that, people also deserve clean air to breathe. And the fact that we can do it um, and that it's not expensive is great.
That is an interesting statistic because you would have to think maybe it has to do with the air quality also helps bring more oxygen into the brain, so therefore you're clearer thinking. So that is a huge plus for implementing these air quality changes. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's everybody thinks, oh, it's COVID, it's so big and scary, but if you break it down, just like any other problem.
And those are some pluses that we can see happening. And there are some things that have come about because of the problem solving and all these different ways that you're trying to make sure that you meet the requirements in a new way. So that is a plus. Thank you for sharing that. That's very interesting to me as a teacher.
Yeah.
We talked about soft skills, and do you have any organizations that you would recommend to the students where they could help develop some of these, like in internships or maybe volunteer opportunities?
Yeah. Volunteer opportunities are really great for this because you'll meet people in all kinds of positions. I used to, when I was younger, volunteer for math counts. The Professional Engineers of North Carolina put on this really excellent math competition for seventh grade students every year, and it's a whole lot of fun. But I got to meet a whole lot of engineers and learn about what they did and, get an idea of if is that what I want to do, and it also gave me experience talking to people that I didn't know before. I'm naturally a very shy person, so it there's always this little bump of nervousness and discomfort whenever I talk to someone new. But even just, going into the room at a volunteering event or at a club or when you're an intern sitting down in the lunchroom next to someone and just saying, "Hi, how are you?" and introducing yourself, it gives you practice to get over that hurdle.
Public speaking has been one of the big things that every presenter has talked about. And like you say, even if you are more shy, learning to function with others and learning to do these give and takes is an important part. And like you say, it just takes practice, whether we like it or not. Public speaking would be a great class for lots of people to take because we appreciate you stepping up and doing this today for us, even though it maybe made you a little uncomfortable because you said you are shy speaking in new situations, but you're giving a lot of your knowledge and expertise to help our students, and we just appreciate that so much.
Oh, absolutely. And I actually have a secret to public speaking to share with your students if they'd like to hear it.
Oh, we would.
Yeah, so interestingly, when you're doing public speaking, everybody has showed up because they want to hear what you have to say. They're already interested and they already like you for taking time out of your day. When you're public speaking, that is the best audience you will ever have because they already like you and they already want to listen. So there's no need to be afraid of them.
Well, and that's a great tip because that's very true. And I think we have found, even with COVID 19, that it has pushed us to the forefront of we're in our living rooms, we're in wherever we are, maybe outside even enjoying some air, and we're having to use all these technologies and different things. So, what recommendations would you have for students and even employees about how can we be better prepared to work in this COVID-19 where we do have the technologies and the different things?
I think a lot of that is based on remembering your normal communication standards, but it's different because you can't just get up from your desk and go to someone else's desk and ask them. So you really need to get used to using all the different tools that are available to you. You know, if you have a quick question, drop it in on the chat in Microsoft Teams. If you need to discuss something that's a little more complicated, set up a Zoom meeting or a video call. You know, if you need to contact someone who's outside of your company, you know, pick up the phone or drop them an email. It's really about staying on top of it and using all the tools that you have available. um, you know, and also admitting when you need help for something because you can get yourself into trouble and run out of time on your projects if you don't realize when you're stuck. So that's a skill that your students will want to develop is knowing when you just need to persevere a little bit more and when you need to go and get that collaboration.
I love that you brought that point up because I think that is something we sometimes forget about. Even if we have certain skill sets, it's important for us to have those networks of people and resources that we can use. And also, like you talked about, the technology tools and knowing what to use and when to use it, and which is the easiest way to do. Project management and all those time management skills are so important, whether you're a student, a worker, and if you can get those skills early in your career or your school career, you are set and go. So, do you have some little secrets or tips that you use to stay on point for what you need to do?
I do actually. I take notes on how long things take at work. And also, when I'm making notes in meetings or to-do lists, I put dates on them. That way I can look back and say, oh, I was working on doing this phase of the project, you know, for 3 whole days. Next time I do it, I know I need at least 3 days to do this. And if I remember looking back at my notes that I was working more than 8 hours a day, I can say, wow, if I don't want to, you know, work overtime, I'm going to need to set aside, you know, an additional 2 days for this phase of the project. So definitely tracking what you're doing will help you with your time management. Knowing when to ask for help can be a little bit more difficult. In what I do, it's a very iterative process, so you are going to have several simulations that don't work out before you get one that does. And that's just because there's a lot of inputs and you have to check all of them. And sometimes they aren't always perfect, and sometimes they reset if you've had to change part of the design. But in general, if you've been working on something for more than half a day, for more than 4 hours, and you're not getting anywhere, don't waste more time trying to figure it out on your own. Even if it's just a 10-minute phone call to one of your coworkers to bounce ideas off of them. Um, when you're stuck, make sure that your first priority is getting unstuck.
Those are great tips and very important to know, because having a fresh set of eyes sometimes is just a great way to help you see something, because sometimes even when we're proofreading something, we see it correct when it's wrong because we keep seeing that. So having that fresh set of eyes is a good opportunity to do that. So thank you for sharing those little tips, because these are things our students need to hear. Even we as professionals need people to help us. Do you have any recommendations for how students can help build their networks and help find those connections that could potentially lead to scholarships, jobs, internships, apprenticeships even? So do you have any tips or thoughts about that?
Yeah. First of all, if when you're in college looking for internships, there are career fairs for various fields, and certainly go to the career fair for your own discipline to find an internship. But if you have the opportunity to go to one of the other disciplines' career fairs just to practice your handshake, to practice handing out your resume, um, that will help you build a lot of confidence. In scholarships, honestly, checking out local foundations, there are some of them that have a ton of different scholarships for all kinds of different things, but you only have to apply once, and then they will review um, what you're interested in and how your grades are and what kind of volunteering activities you've done, and find a match for you. So if you can sort of apply for a lot of different ones at once, that's really handy. Definitely check with your school, wherever you're applying, to see if they have anything that's available. You can consider working for student housing as an RA. You can work for campus dining. Um, you can have part-time jobs in college, and normally it's pretty easy to handle. It's harder if you are trying to work more hours, though, so there will be a balance for you. Um, the other ways for getting scholarships. Um, you'll want to have volunteer experience. Um, and again, it doesn't mean that you have to, go out and muck out stables for a horse farm. It doesn't mean you have to do something that you wouldn't ordinarily want to do. Um, I helped out with math counts with the Professional Engineers of North Carolina because I wanted to be an engineer, and I thought that helping young students pursue their passion in mathematics was great. So you have to volunteer, but you get to pick what you volunteer in. So choose something that's fun and that you like, and take on leadership positions in clubs when you're in high school. Um, just the organizational skills will help you immensely in life, as well as look really good on your college applications.
That is very true advice, because I know every school looks for what a student has done in their communities and in their schools to be part of the broader perspective of society. So having these volunteer opportunities is a very important aspect of their high school career. And schools don't just look at academics, so thank you for bringing those to light, that they are a very important part, because I know a lot of our students are right now in the middle of trying to do early admissions so that they can get back their information earlier, so they're really swamped. And I think that's one of the things everybody's kind of drowning right now. I work in the peer tutoring center, and we just had this lengthy conversation on Slack about how overwhelmed they're feeling from all the schoolwork and trying to get the other things that they need. So, are there some self care, self help tips that we might could give our students? Because this is something I'm hearing across the state, because they're having, one student told me he had 7 Zoom meetings one day, and
Oh
that's just
no.
mind blowing. I mean, and then you have your homework on top of that. So, are there any tips you might could think how they could do some just self care and self help with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Self-care is a skill that you should learn early and use often. Working in a consulting industry, there will be times where you are working overtime, and that just happens. You have to be able to be resilient and bounce back. Some of the things I do for self-care is when I'm just really exhausted and I've been working on the same thing for hours. It's a big building and I'm, drawing every single window onto the building. It gets tedious and, at some point I'm just like, I can't concentrate anymore. When I do that, I I take a step back and I go for a walk outside, you know, away from everything. I put my phone in my pocket in case someone desperately needs me, but I leave my computer where it is and I go on a walk. I find my peace. So for your students, it might be listening to their favorite kind of music. It might be, taking a few minutes to just talk on the phone with another student, not even in a study group, but just call their friend and, hang out for a bit, just have some of time away from that stressful context. It really takes a surprisingly little amount of time to get that kind of perspective, but it is important that you do it. Also, eating and drinking regularly. When I'm stressed out, I forget to eat. It's a very bad habit to get into. So don't do that. Eat breakfast, eat lunch, and eat dinner. And if you get hungry in between, eat a snack. And don't go for junk. Go for what makes you feel full. Go for healthy proteins. Yogurt, fruits, vegetables. Um, things that will help you feel good throughout the day. I find that protein makes me feel healthy, so um, I try to eat that consistently throughout the day. And that really helps me feel good. When you're hungry, you don't always notice that you're hungry, but you can get into very pessimistic attitude. Um, So, just taking care of your body and taking care of your mental space, even if it's just getting away for a few minutes, can really help.
Thank you for that advice. And I think we think sometimes, oh, I need to get this done, I need to get this done. But if we don't step away, we get in that cycle of we're just even more tired. And like you say, our minds are just spinning. And if, we're spending a lot of time on something, we probably need to step back. So thank you for that great advice, because we find that everyone feels like they're just overwhelmed right now to try to get everything done. So I think that's an important part of the picture that we have to remember. Our self care and self help is part of it, and we need to take care of our mental health as well as our physical health and our work health. So thank you for that. Getting back to our renewable energy sources, what are some job opportunities that you might see coming about in the next few years? We talk about AI, artificial intelligence, and the concern that it's going to overtake a lot of jobs, but what other job opportunities might be coming down the future that students might think about looking at if they're interested in especially renewable energy sources?
Sure. So there are tons of different jobs in the renewable energy field. You need people to design these solar arrays. You know, someone has to calculate that these panels aren't shading each other. Um, and you need someone who really understands how it works. Um, so designing systems is a huge opportunity. Installing systems is a very big opportunity as well. You can't just get someone off the side of the road to install this stuff. They need to know how the racking works. They need to know how to attach the panels to the racking. They need to know how to ground all the solar panels. You know, really bad things can happen to electrical equipment when it's struck by lightning. You need to make sure that you protect the equipment and you protect anybody who might be in the immediate area. So installing it is also a really important job. Um, we also need people who can advocate for these technologies. We need people to be in marketing. We need people, you know, on the back end studying how solar panels work, finding more efficient ways to layer these materials and to manufacture them. You know, a solar panel isn't a monolithic thing. Someone designs each part and piece of it. So we need people to actually build the solar panels themselves too. We need people in the government to, you know, be able to understand these things as well. So if you're thinking about going into government, being aware of the various technologies available is also something you need to do. So really there's a ton of different things that are available in the renewable energy field, from designing to installing the panels themselves, making sure you have good policy that covers your solar panels so that they're being installed safely on good sites and that the community gets to benefit from those being there.
Those are some great opportunities. And what types of interest levels, like science, would that be a big one that you would, are there particular sciences that might be better for that than others that you could share with our students?
Sure. So for renewable energy engineering, if you enjoy doing physics, this is going to be something that you would really like because it has, you know, the heat transfer, it has structural elements. Um, you know, it's less biology and chemistry. I took both of those classes in high school and chemistry in college, but it was not something that I was the most interested in. But physics was really great. I really enjoyed thermodynamics. Um, I really enjoyed mechanics of materials. Um, so those types of classes, you know, the study of energy transfer and motion, those are really good if you are interested in solar and wind. If you want to go into battery storage technology, actually chemistry was very necessary there. So if you like chemistry and you like renewable energy, you can definitely go into battery storage. We need experts to develop the next generation of that technology. So yeah, if you go do that, there also will be jobs in that too.
Thank you for those great examples. What about the math and the maybe coding? where would that come into play with our renewable energy sources?
Well, engineers nowadays do their own coding. So sometimes you'll have to do controls for systems and set up communications between different systems, um, particularly if you have, say, a battery storage and an inverter. You don't want the inverter to overcharge the battery and heat it up really hot and make it explode. That'd be bad. Um, so yes, there is programming, and in general, you can do as much programming as you want. Um, in engineering, really, um, the more you code, the more things you can do. And if you enjoy it, you can always seek out the opportunity to do coding. Mathematics is very important, particularly understanding the fundamentals, but you will not have to do every single calculation by hand. Once you're at work, you will be allowed to use a calculator. um, but definitely it's important to understand the theory. In college, you won't always be able to use a calculator just because you have to have a really solid foundation in theory to be successful in the future. Um, I actually do a lot of coding in my job. To do energy compliance for California, it's actually all written in XML code. And so occasionally, if something has gone wrong in the program, I have to go line by line in the code that I have written for my building and manually edit it, which um, sometimes is annoying and sometimes it's easy. Depends upon how much you like debugging code.
Thanks again for those great examples. It sounds like being patient might be a great, as well as being a very type A kind of personality where you see things and you're very patient to go down through and make sure all the boxes are checked.
Yeah, and if you're not type A, if you're type B, if you're a little messy and a little untidy, just make a check. Don't you up with everybody who already, tries to track every single detail of everything. Personally, I'm actually not type A, uh, and I will tell you, attention to detail can be learned if you care enough and if you find something interesting. So even if there are a lot of moving parts and you're not the kind of person who, you know, fills out every day in their planner, you still can be successful as long as you know what to keep track of and keep track of that when you need to.
Well, I think that's some great advice because knowing our personality and the things that we do is very important to when we have to be in a work situation because, like you say, those attentions to detail are very important for some jobs. And if that's not a natural ability, I'm glad that you shared that that is something we can learn to do if we're interested enough and we're invested in what we're doing. So it all comes back in careers, like we tell our students a lot. Make sure it's something you're interested in because that's what makes it a good career rather than just a job you have to go to and do. So I think those are just some great insights that you've given our students. Is there anything you want to add? We're at 1:48, and that'll get, if we'll spend a few more minutes and then we'll open up if there's any questions.
Yeah, so I know that sometimes when you're young, it's hard to necessarily know exactly what you want to do in the future and understand exactly what your biggest strengths are. And people are always like, "Oh, what's your plan going forward? What are you going to be doing in 5 years?" And you make a plan, and it changes. I had an internship working with agricultural products, and I really enjoyed it. It was in manufacturing and I loved it. It was tons of fun. There was always something going on the factory floor, um, and it was a lot of fun. I really thought, though, that it'd be cool to work in the automotive industry, make cars. I love cars. I love driving. And I got an excellent internship working with a car parts manufacturer, and I didn't love it. And I was so disappointed because I thought that that was going to be great. I thought this internship was going to get me the career of my dreams, and I realized I didn't really like it. And then, of course, I discovered, you know, building performance and renewable energy, and I really love that too. But sometimes you have an idea of what you're going to enjoy and be doing, and sometimes you're going to have to make your plans again when it doesn't work out. And also, you're going to have to leave the door open to that, the factor of, luck or serendipity or divine intervention. Sometimes things just happen, and just staying open to those opportunities has a lot of value as well. Also, people are going to ask you that one question um, for job interviews, for admission entry. They'll ask you to answer it in your college essay. What's your greatest strength and what's your greatest weakness? So, what's your greatest strength? Write about, tell them how you're awesome. They ask, they want to know. But what your greatest weakness is, they don't want to know what your greatest weakness is in the sense of they don't want you to open up and spill everything and, make yourself sound like you're incompetent. They want to know what you're doing to improve that. So whenever someone asks about your weakness, they want to know what you're doing about it. They want to know what steps you're taking to improve. So that's the secret of what that question means. It's not straightforward. There's implied, and what are you doing about it? But also answering that part of the question will really show that you have to be able to move forward in life.
You have such great advice for our students because that is really what employers and what college application admission officers want to know. How am I going to overcome something that might be a problem or issue? So being a problem solver and coming up with a plan shows them that you have that aptitude for trying to figure out how to get things done. So they see that as a good fit for either the workplace or the college campus or university campus. So thank you for sharing that. You need to show yourself in your best light with your strengths, but you also need to show when you have weaknesses. You need to show how you're going to work to improve that. So thank you for that great information. Okay, if we want to open the floor, is there any questions from the audience that you'd like to ask Miss Lowrie? I've just enjoyed this so much and have learned a lot, even in a different field that I'm not as familiar with. So thank you for sharing your expertise. We'd love to have any questions.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Feel free to ask me anything about being an engineer. I know sometimes you think, oh, maybe they won't want to answer this question. No, we're here for you. I came just to answer your questions. Oh, so someone has asked, when you decided not to go in the automotive industry, what exactly made you realize that it wasn't what you wanted to do? Well, um, I was working on a particular part and it had to be put onto a spindle and go through an oven at 700 degrees to get this epoxy to set correctly. And they were having trouble with the part with the epoxy on it falling off the spindle. And I asked a little bit more about it. I said, how long has this been a problem? How long have you been having this issue? I wanted to see if it was maybe the age of the equipment, had epoxy been getting on the spindles and, messing them up? Did the spindles just need to be replaced more often than the other parts in the assembly? Or had it always been messed up and it never worked right? Well, I was told that it had started about 18 months before, and then suddenly it was all going wrong. And I asked around in other places, and I found out that they had started adding extra lubricant earlier in the process, um, because they kept on having to replace this metal funnel, because it would get dinged and scratched a lot, and eventually it would not be the right shape. And I realized that that lubricant they were adding there was what was making the parts fall off of the spindles. And when I asked if they would consider just replacing the hopper more, which was a very cheap part, they were like, oh no. And I thought, this this is not the kind of place where I want to work. You know, the problem was really something else, but they weren't willing to fix it. And that just drove me nuts. And I realized that, some industries are more or less flexible than others. When I was working with agricultural products, everything was very flexible because every year's crop is slightly different from the last. Some years just are very spicy, depending upon how much rainfall you got, you know, and there was a lot of built-in flexibility. So I didn't like the mindset that everything had to be the way it was just because that was the way it was.
Thanks for the question, Carmelo. Anyone else want to ask Miss Larcy a question? Well, Miss Lowry, it doesn't look like we have any more questions, and we're right at the end of our session. And I just want to thank you again and Little for providing this great opportunity for our I Work speaker series in with the NC Career Connections, because it's a great service to our students across North Carolina. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm always glad to help. Little's always glad to help. And we're always looking for more engineers in the industry. There's always job openings. We're always looking for talented people to fill them. So it's very exciting to let students know that this opportunity is available.
And engineering, as you shared earlier, is such a broad field that there's so many opportunities. So thank you for bringing this portion of it to our students, and we just appreciate it and wish you well in all that you do. Thank you again.
Yes, and I hope all of you do well with the virtual classes and the virtual schooling, and I hope you all stay safe from COVID.
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you, Ms. Lowry and Carmelo and Towns for coming, and we'll conclude this session. So thank you very much.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for coming.